It was still dark when Maria woke up. The narrow strip of sky visible through the bedroom window remained an inky black canvas, untouched by the brush strokes of dawn's first light. She glanced over at Jorge, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of deep sleep. Careful not to disturb him, she slipped quietly out of bed and tiptoed across the cool tile floor. In the living room, Maria pulled back the curtain and peered outside. The small courtyard between the apartment building and its neighbors remained cloaked in pre-dawn shadows. A few stubborn stars still twinkled dimly overhead. She dropped the curtain closed and moved to the kitchen to make herself a cup of coffee. As the harsh aroma of the dark roast filled the air, Maria settled into one of the mismatched chairs at the battered wooden table that had been a hand-me-down from her mother years ago. She cradled the warm mug between her palms and took a sip, letting the bitter liquid linger on her tongue. Today would be her last sunrise in this little ground-floor apartment in Old San Juan, Puerto Rico that had been her home for nearly 60 years. Tomorrow, she and Jorge would be leaving it all behind: the sights, the sounds, the smells, the people, to move to the cold, unfamiliar north. To leave the island that had given them life for a land they didn't know. All because of her. A lump formed in Maria's throat as guilt wormed its way into the peaceful start of her day. She closed her eyes, trying to keep the tears at bay. This move was her idea, her burden to bear, not Jorge's. It wasn't fair to ask him to leave everything he knew behind just for her. But he had agreed without a second thought when she broached the subject months ago. "Wherever you go, I will follow, mi amor," were his exact words, spoken with a serene smile as he pulled her into his arms. A deep sadness weighed on Maria's heart. She didn't want to leave her beloved island home. But she didn't have a choice, not anymore. The doctors at the clinic had made that brutally clear during her last visit. Setting down her mug, she rose and made her way back to the bedroom. Jorge was still slumbering peacefully, blissfully unaware of the melancholy thoughts swirling in his wife's mind. Maria drank in the sight of him, memorizing the contours of the face she had loved for over half a century. She ran a featherlight caress down the deep creases in his cheek as her vision blurred with unshed tears. "Oh, Jorge," she whispered in a choked voice, "how will I find the courage to tell you?" As if her words had the power to rouse him, Jorge stirred, blinking slowly awake. He focused his brown eyes on her face, their depths full of tender adoration. A soft, sleepy smile curved his lips. "Buenos dias, querida mia," he murmured, reaching up to cup her cheek. "The sunrise will be here soon. Shall we go sit in the courtyard as we always do?" The innocent inquiry twisted the knot of grief in Maria's chest. This dawn would be their last in the place they had called home for so many years. And for her, she swallowed hard against the hot lump in her throat. For her, it may well be the last sunrise altogether. "See," she managed in a tremulous whisper. "One last time, mi amor." She rose and moved to the small closet, dressing quickly in the light cotton dress and slim cardigan she typically wore at home. When she emerged, Jorge was already waiting by the front door in his faded robe and slippers, holding it open for her. They crossed the small living room together, his palm resting warmly on the small of her back as they stepped out into the courtyard. The first pale streaks of color were just beginning to bleed onto the horizon, staining the indigo sky with brushstrokes of peach and coral. A warm, humid breeze ruffled Maria's gray curls. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the familiar sense of the island fill her lungs. The sweet aroma of the ripe mangoes from the tree in the corner, the sharp tang of the ocean that lingered on the air, the slightly musty smell of the ancient bricks underfoot. Memories overwhelmed her in a bittersweet rush. Playing as a child in this very courtyard, chasing after Jorge as he would, run laughing from her. Dancing with her new husband to the strains of a guitar and clapping palms late into the starry night. Watching her young sons race wildly around the tiny space until they collapsed in exhausted heaps. Grandchildren shrieking with delight as Jorge tossed them high, catching them in his strong arms as peals of laughter rang out. So many mornings spent here with her love, watching the sun rise over the rooftops, its brilliance slowly banishing the night's shadows. Now the rosy fingers of dawn crept over the lip of the horizon, ushering forth the arrival of another new day. Part of Maria's soul rejoiced as it did every morning at the glorious rebirth of light and color. Yet today, her heart shattered with the realization that her own rebirth would never come. This sunrise would be her last. Jorge settled into one of the chairs with a contented hum, the brilliant pinks and oranges painting his face in a warm glow. Maria watched him for a long moment, drinking in the sight of the man she loved so dearly. Then, with a tremulous breath, she sank into the chair beside him and laid her head on his shoulder. His arm encircled her waist, drawing her near. "It's going to be a beautiful day, mi vida," he murmured into her hair. The courtyard brightened steadily, the rays of the morning sun slipping around the corners of the ancient buildings to spill across the cracked bricks and terracotta tiles. Sparrows began to chirp from the bougainvillea vines winding along the wrought iron fences. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crowed harshly to greet the new day, his penetrating call echoed by his rivals down the narrow Callahans. Soon the entire courtyard was awash with light and shadow and vibrant colors. The crimson flash of a Caribbean woodpecker streaked by as he darted between overstuffed flower pots. The scent of strong coffee and fresh bread wafted through open windows as other residents began to stir. An elderly woman in a muumuu shuffled past, cradling a birdcage containing a raucous green parrot. Children's laughter rang out down the street as youngsters scampered off to school. A whiff of mouth-watering spices and sizzling meat drifted from a nearby restaurant prepping for the morning rush. Maria absorbed it all, the simple yet achingly familiar sights and sounds and smells that combined to forge this uniquely Puerto Rican sense of place.
Her Puerto Rico.
Her island home that had given her life, sheltered her, nourished her every need for nearly 6 decades. And now she was being forced to leave it behind. The wave of sorrow that washed over her was so intense she could scarcely breathe. How could she find the words to tell Jorge they would never see another sunrise from this courtyard? Never again have mornings like this one. Beside her, Jorge shifted so that he was looking not at the courtyard, but at her. He reached out with one weathered hand to gently caress her cheek, smoothing away the single tear that had slipped free to trace down her face. His expression was alight with a soft, patient love deeper than any ocean. "Talk to me, mi vida," he urged gently. Maria swallowed hard, her throat working convulsively as she struggled to find her voice. "Oh, Jorge." Her words emerged in a choked whisper. "How can I tell you? The doctors." She broke off, the pain lancing through her chest, stealing the rest of her words. Jorge's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing away the fresh moisture that sprang to her eyes. "Mi amor, you are worrying me." The tender rumble of his voice surrounded her like a comforting blanket. What did the doctors say? Maria was helpless against the tidal wave of grief that crashed over her. She leaned into her husband's solid strength and wept, her tears quickly soaking the soft fabric of his robe. His arms enveloped her in their warm, protective circle as he held her close, rubbing her back and crooning wordless sounds of comfort. Eventually, she was able to regain a measure of control. She drew a long, shuddering breath and pulled back just enough to look into Jorge's beloved face. He was gazing down at her with an open expression of concern. "The cancer, it has spread," she finally rasped, the terrible truth tearing at her soul. "There is nothing more they can do. It's too late." Jorge was still for a long moment, absorbing the anguishing news. Maria could see the thundercloud of devastation cross his features. Then, as quickly as the storm arrived, it passed, leaving only a deep and sorrowful acceptance behind. He leaned forward to press his forehead tenderly to hers. "Oh, mi corazón," he breathed, his voice cracking with emotion. "My poor, brave girl. I'm so sorry." At the gentle endearment, the dam within Maria broke once more. She dissolved into harsh, wrenching sobs, clinging to the solid anchor of Jorge's embrace as her world crumbled around her. She cried for the cruelty of her fate, for the life being torn from her grasp when she still had so much left to live, for this glorious morning that would go down in memory as the last she would ever see. Mostly, she wept for her beloved Jorge and the crushing loss she was forcing on him. because as devastating as her diagnosis was for her, she knew it would be doubly so for him. The husband who would have to face the long, lonely road ahead without his amour at his side for the first time in nearly 60 years. Jorge simply held her, shedding his own silent tears as he rocked them gently in the fragrant morning air. He stroked her back in long, soothing caresses and pressed endless tender kisses to her hair, her forehead, anywhere his lips could reach. His voice rumbled beneath her cheek, a constant murmur of heartbroken Spanish endearments. At last, when the storm of her anguish had passed, Maria pulled back to gaze at him with swollen, grief-ravaged eyes. Her fingers traced lightly over the tears streaking his cheeks, her own features twisted with remorse. "Mi amor, I'm so sorry," she whispered brokenly. "You shouldn't have to suffer this way just because of me." With exquisite gentleness, Jorge slid one hand to cup the back of her head, holding her close as he leaned in to dust the softest of kisses across her brow, her eyelids, the damp curve of her cheek. He drew back just enough to meet her gaze, his own liquid eyes overflowing with devotion. "Corazón mía," he murmured fervently, his voice throbbing with emotion. "There is nothing to be sorry for. We have been granted the most precious gift of all, a lifetime together, you and I. Nearly 60 years of friendship, of laughter and embraces, of dancing beneath the stars and whispering sweet nothings to each other on sleepy mornings just like this." His thumb caressed her cheek, smudging away a fresh trickle of moisture. "Yes, my heart is breaking for the cruel fate that has befallen you, that is stealing you from me far too soon. But my sorrow could never outweigh the immense gratitude and joy I feel for having been blessed with so much time at your side. You have given me that lifetime of memories to cherish, mi vida. No man could ever hope for more." As his rich, rumbling cadences washed over her, Maria felt a soothing sort of calm begin to unfurl within her battered soul. Somehow, her beloved Jorge had once again steadied her spirit with his unwavering strength and deep wisdom. How many times had she nearly crumbled under life's harsh blows, only to find her center again in the haven of his embrace. She gazed at him through a soft sheen of grateful tears, letting the radiant warmth of his adoring expression fill the hollow spaces grief had carved within her. "Jorge." He quieted her with a gentle shushing sound and a tender press of his fingertips to her lips. "Rest now, mi vida. Let me give you the serenity you so deserve this morning." Then he enveloped her in his arms once more, tucking her head beneath his chin as if to shield her from any further sorrow. She acquiesced with a trembling sigh, melting against the comforting solidity of his broad chest. Around them, the courtyard sang with the bright cacophony of morning. The combined sounds of crowing roosters, trilling birds, laughter, cheery greetings exchanged in lyrical Spanish, and 100 other unique noises blended into one perfect, achingly familiar symphony. Gradually, Maria felt the ragged shards of her heartache being smoothed and sanded down by the melody of their beloved island home. As the physical ache in her chest eased, her eyes traced the calming mural of dappled light and shadow, blazing flowers and vibrant paint, the breathtaking tableau painted by the day's first rays. Puerto Rico in all her resplendent tropical glory surrounded them, sinking undiminished into Maria's senses one final time. She breathed deeply of the intoxicating potpourri of scents: salty ocean, fresh bread, pungent fuel from a passing truck, night-blooming jasmine on the evening breeze, committing them to her deepest memories. Time seemed to stand still in that sunlit courtyard. Later, Maria would not be able to say how long they simply sat like that, Jorge cradling her in his loving arms as the morning bustle flowed around them unnoticed. But at some point, her tears finally stopped and the anguish weighing on her soul lifted, allowing an almost peaceful resignation to take its place. Tipping her head back, she met her husband's tender gaze with a watery smile.
Gracias, Jorge.
For loving me enough to make this moment bearable. He returned her smile with one just as brilliant, his brown eyes sparkling with pure, unadulterated adoration. It is I who should be thanking you, Corazon. You have been the light of my life for nearly 6 decades. How could I not do everything in my power to ease your sorrow now at the end? The gentle resonance of his words washed over her, and Maria knew, without a single shred of doubt, that the love they shared transcended the pain of her diagnosis, the cruelty of her fate. It was a perfect love, timeless and eternal. Even death itself could not diminish or sever the bond Jorge's devotion had forged around her heart. With a soft sigh of acceptance, she settled herself against his chest once more. "Hold me, mi amor," she whispered. "Just hold me while we watch our last sunrise together." Jorge's arms tightened around her with fierce tenderness as a fresh wave of moisture coursed down his face. But there was no sorrow in his voice when he spoke, only a surrendered serenity. "Siempre, mi vida," he vowed with his customary gentle strength. Until the very end, as the radiant orb of the new day slowly crested the horizon in a blinding wash of molten gold, Jorge held his waning wife in a fervent embrace, the pair of them silhouetted against the glory of a new dawn. Just as they had on so many mornings before, they greeted the sunrise together. This time, however, was their last, and when the final ruby-tinged ray at last faded from the sky, Jorge closed his eyes and simply held her, savoring his life's purest love as they watched their forever sunset together.